Bone Machine!
Once upon a simpler time, as the Pisces sun began to set, Jean-Louis Kerouac caught his first breath in this strange world. It was in Lowell, Massachusetts, the 12th of March, 1922, year of the dog, a sign of good fortune in the eyes of the ancient Chinese, but the Kerouacs only owned cats. The small city of Lowell, up in the north, was just about to fall off the cliff. By 1922, the jobs were moving south, the Depression was on its way, and even the happy days years of America wouldn't revive it. But Kerouac caught the end, and cataloged it all like a bright-eyed kid in a world that wasn't too big yet. He writes about this part of his life pretty beautifully in The Town and the City. The first passage is the Merrimack River, broad and placid, flows down to it from the New Hampshire hills, broken at the falls to make frothy havoc on the rocks, foaming on over ancient stone towards a place where the river suddenly swings about in a wide and peaceful basin, moving on now around the flank of the town, onto places known as Lawrence and Haverhill, through a wooded valley, and onto a sea at Plum Island, where the river enters an infinity of water and is gone. Then there's the masterpiece On the Road, which I found when everyone else did, in that period of youth when you begin to realize you don't know yourself at all, and you don't like what they're telling you to become. On the Road did exactly to me what it was supposed to, at least I thought back then. I read the book at 16 and it screamed for freedom. It made me want to burn my textbooks and go be a writer in California. So I did. But my plan didn't work. My book wasn't published, and finally broken, burnt out, I turned 27 and ended up back at my parents' house. I started reading a lot of Kerouac at the time. I found a letter he wrote to a friend where he said, "I'm 30 years old. Sometimes I think the only thing that's ready to accept me is death. Nothing in life seems to want me or even remember me." A whole decade had passed since I'd last read On the Road. I decided to go back and reread it. It was like finding a different gospel. What I had initially thought was hope and confidence and revolution was actually the opposite. Without the lens of youth, I realized that he was actually saying, the universe does not care about you. I read about lonely roads this time, decisions that took guts and the chips still didn't fall right. I was reading about an artist who rolled the dice and knew he was losing. I read On the Road in an endless loop for the rest of that year. I started to get pieces published, and whenever I was asked who my favorite writer was, I would say Kerouac. They always laughed at this revelation. I found that almost no one else had ever actually read On the Road, and the few people that had never read anything else. It's tragic. Kerouac's name is synonymous with literature and adventure, and yet almost no one has ever actually read him. Right after I turned 29, I got a book published. Before I did any celebrating, I knew I needed to do something for the gods that were looking down on me. So I got in a car and I drove to Massachusetts. About 4 hours north of New York City, we took an exit for Lowell, Massachusetts. We came through the back end of the city and I drove us over a high bridge that straddled the Merrimack River. Kerouac had written it perfectly. The river did seem placid from that height. The water did break over rocks and leave frothy havoc. We drove through the city until we found the Edson Cemetery. A small grave marker, a little bigger than a cinder block, cut a square deep into the tall grass. It was easy to find. The disciples who had come before us left a memorial of cigarettes, empty wine bottles, roses, rolling papers. Just behind the grave, a new monument stood clean. In it was etched a dove and the quote, "The road is life." And there we stood around the grave and smoked cigarettes, right where Dylan and Ginsberg had paid their last respects. I took out my book and laid a copy on the grave. I thought about this man Kerouac, who so desperately wanted to become a legend he lost himself on the climb. All those years in the backs of cars and the tops of mountains, typing away while the world kept moving, and finally he got his due. But when the royalties and the fans came, he turned on what he had inspired. A whole generation followed his message, but Kerouac never saw them as anything but losers, spoiled losers, a serious drag on his whole vibe. It wasn't long before he was spending more time building fences than writing books. Kerouac was young, he had the heart of a buffalo, so eager to see the land before him, yet by the time he died he had come full circle, scribbling away an unfinished manuscript about his childhood in Lowell. We stood there and saluted his headstone. Then we walked back to the car. I thought of the man who said, "I just won't sleep," I decided. There were so many other interesting things to do. And then I thought, this is the same man who said, "As far as I'm concerned, the only thing to do is sit in a room and get drunk." And I realized that whether I was on my yin or my yang, or whatever in between, any thought I ever had, this man had already said it better.